My parents want to force me to hand over my college savings to pay for my sister's apartment, but when they kick me out, they ruin their reputation with the family that hates them. My family has been going through a difficult financial time recently, and I, considering the situation, got a job so I could afford my college education. But their expectations are completely unrealistic. Last week, they told me I had to use my college savings to help my sister because she was about to move into a new place but was short on money. For context, my dad left his job a couple of years ago to start a new business. Unfortunately, COVID hit right at that moment, and his business couldn't take off as expected. But he didn't lose hope and kept working hard on it. He's still working on it, and things are slowly improving, so that's good news for him. However, that also means that we haven't had enough money to maintain our lifestyle for a long time. My mom has always been a stay-at-home mom, so getting a job was unthinkable for her because it wasn't something she wanted to do. Our parents told us that we had to find a way to live on our own. They would support us until we turned 18, but after that, it would be difficult for them to save for their own retirement while also taking care of us. They had already used a significant amount of their savings so that we could continue living as we were used to during the lockdown and everything that followed. So my sister and I had to take care of ourselves after turning 18. A couple of weeks ago, I finally graduated from high school and am now 18 years old, so I knew I would have to cover my college expenses on my own. I had everything planned out because I had been working since I was 16 and had done a couple of internships. I managed to save money from that. Maybe it wasn't enough to cover all of college, but with a student loan, I could make it work. My sister is 22 now and just graduated. She also took out a student loan, but she had no savings of her own. Even while she was in college, she didn't bother to work, and that's her choice. I'm not going to judge her for that, but I am judging her for expecting me, her younger brother, to cover the rent for her first apartment now that she's moving out of our parents' house to start working. She and some high school friends are renting an apartment together, and all of them have already paid their share, but she's short just a couple of $1,000s from the expected amount. She doesn't want to tell her friends that our family isn't exactly in a stable financial situation right now because that would be quite embarrassing for her. Though I really don't understand that if they're truly her friends, why would they judge her? That's why her friends can't cover her part for now, and she would have to pay them back later. Our parents had already told us that after turning 18, we shouldn't expect any financial support from them, so that leaves me. The worst part is that she didn't even come to ask me for the money herself. She told our parents what she needed, and they handled the conversation with me instead. To be honest, my sister and I don't get along very well. We're just very different, and I was actually a little relieved when she told us she was moving out because having her back home after she graduated from college for a few weeks, until she found a job, was quite exhausting for me. Last week, when this happened, we were all still living together. I'm going to start college in a couple of months, and my uncle and aunt have already co-signed my loan. My sister was supposed to move out a few days ago, though I don't know what happened with that. 3 days before she was supposed to move, my parents came to my room and told me she was only a couple of $1,000s short. They knew I had been saving money for college, so they wanted me to use those savings for this and help my sister. They even assured me that she would pay me back as soon as possible, although she could have talked to me directly, which would have been much more respectful. To be honest, I didn't even know how she could afford the rent since, as far as I know, she hadn't worked a single day and I didn't think she had any savings of her own. But apparently, she did have some, just not enough. But that wasn't my problem, and I told my parents that it was her own fault for not working while she was in college, even though she knew our parents wouldn't be supporting us as adults. Now, not being able to pay the rent for her first apartment was a problem she had created herself, and she was going to have to solve it on her own. Besides, covering my college expenses was far more important than her ability to move in with her friends. I thought my parents would be reasonable and understand why I didn't want to share my savings with her since, until now, they had never been the kind of parents who treated my sister and me differently. But instead, they started making a big fuss about how I was acting and told me I was being very selfish. They thought it would be easy to convince me. I don't know why. And when I refused to help her, they started arguing with me. After a really bad argument with my parents about this, my dad lost control at one point. He told me that if I was going to be selfish and not share my savings with my sister, that meant I didn't value my family as much as they expected, so they would behave the same way with me, be selfish, and ask me to leave the house. Basically, my only two options were to help my sister and share my savings with her, or be kicked out of the house. I chose the second option because, honestly, that was very humiliating for me. I never expected my parents to use the fact that I depended on them for a while, at least until I started college, against me. But I guess their priority now was my sister, and I'm not sure, but I think it was because they didn't want anyone to know that our family wasn't financially well off. If my sister had been honest with her friends and asked them to cover her, she would have had to tell them all about our financial situation. Since they're high school friends, their parents would have found out as well, and those parents know my parents well since it's a small, close-knit neighborhood. So, I guess that's why they didn't want my sister telling anyone what was going on. In fact, they had put a lot of effort into hiding the fact that we were having financial problems. Not even anyone in the family knew, except for my uncle and his wife. My uncle is my dad's older brother, and since he was one of the first investors in my dad's business, of course, he's aware of everything. Initially, my dad was even against the idea of my uncle co-signing my loan, but in the end, he had to accept it since co-signing both my sister's and my loan applications could backfire on him. So, even though he didn't like the idea of being even more indebted to my uncle, he had to let me turn to him for help. They weren't even asking me to study at a nearby university. I was going to a university in another state, which would be even more expensive. Anyway, I knew their reputation meant a lot to them, and I knew they were doing everything possible to make sure no one found out how much they were struggling. After the fight I had with my parents, I left home. I still couldn't accept the fact that they had kicked me out just because I refused to follow their rules. It was insulting and humiliating, so I decided to take advantage of the fact that their reputation and money meant so much to them. After that argument, I immediately started packing my things, and my parents didn't even make an effort to stop me. That night, I packed everything I needed, put it in a bag, then took a taxi and headed to my uncle's house. I felt a little guilty about constantly bothering him, but when I got there and explained the situation, he told me I was welcome to stay with him and his wife for as long as I wanted. Their kids were already adults and living independently, so now I'm staying in my cousin's old room. When I left, my parents stood at the door and didn't try to stop me. Even when my uncle called my dad to talk to him about what was happening with me, my dad made it clear that if I wasn't going to think about my family and put them first, then I had no place in their home. It was ironic that they called me selfish, but in my opinion, they were the ones truly being selfish. For the past week, I've been living with my uncle and aunt. They've been very kind, but that still hasn't helped distract me. My uncle and aunt keep telling me that everything will be fine and that they're sure my parents will come to their senses eventually and apologize to me, but I'm not so sure anymore. Yesterday afternoon, I was feeling particularly down, and then I don't know what came over me. I just decided I needed to talk about this. But I was also feeling very vengeful, so instead of venting to my friends, I decided to post on Facebook and tell the whole truth. I wrote a post with every little detail about what had happened and completely exposed my parents, and then I hit the post button. After that, I set my phone aside and went out for a walk because I knew that as soon as they found out about the post, my parents would start flooding my phone with calls. I hadn't blocked them anywhere so far because I was hoping they would reach out to me at some point, but in the past week, they hadn't even bothered to ask how I was doing. Anyway, when I got back to my uncle's house from my walk after 30 minutes, both my uncle and aunt looked very serious. They told me they had read my post and didn't think it was necessary at this time. But since I had already posted it without even talking to them about it, the only thing I could do was apologize to them for not giving them a heads up. I was just feeling really down and wanted to get back at my parents somehow. They seemed a little disappointed, but they didn't say much, so at least I was okay on that front. However, when I got back to my phone, I saw that I had several missed calls and messages from my parents. Just as I expected, all the messages were along the same lines. They said they had been right to ask me to leave the house because it was obvious I couldn't think about anyone but myself and that I was truly selfish. With this post, I had proven that I was also a bad person. They accused me of ruining their reputation by making it seem like they were the villains here and that they had purposely kicked me out, even though it had been my decision to leave because I preferred to abandon my family when they needed my help, rather than stay and be there for them. Most of the messages were very angry, and I felt somewhat vindicated because, at least now, they were feeling exactly the betrayal and disappointment I had felt over the past week. While I was reading the messages, I got another call from my mom, and this time, I decided to answer it. As soon as I picked up the phone, I regretted it because she was crying as if someone had died, and I could hear my dad yelling at me in the background. He was cursing at me while my mom tried to talk to me through her sobs. It was a little hard to understand what she was saying, but I could make out that she was trying to get me to delete the post. Many of our relatives had messaged them, saying it was unacceptable for them to try to force me to help them financially because I was still so young and had my own future to think about. Instead of helping my sister, they were just taking money from one child to give to the other, and that wasn't fair. My mom was trying to make it seem like I hadn't told the whole story in my post, acting as if I had framed the story in a way that made them look like the villains. But honestly, I had just shared my side of things, and I don't think it was my fault that our relatives didn't agree with their behavior. Besides, this is social media. I can share whatever I want, but at least I had the decency to tell the complete truth and not hide any details. My mom started saying that if I was going to share my side of things, then I should have also mentioned how they had always supported my sister and me when it was possible for them. Now, they only expected us to help each other because it was hard for them to do so. She wanted me to post something about how extravagant our lifestyle had been while my dad was supporting us. Then I started feeling really guilty because that was true. Both my sister and I had been spoiled by our parents, and they had gone out of their way to make sure we were well taken care of when my dad was making a lot of money. But still, I don't think that excuses the kind of behavior I've had to face recently. The most important thing is that my parents were upset because I decided to make this information public, even though I knew that the last thing they wanted was for people to find out they were struggling financially. So, even though I've received a lot of support and love from many family members and friends on social media, I still feel guilty about the conversation I had with my parents the night before. Even the way my uncle and aunt are acting makes me feel bad about what I did. I feel like I should delete the post, but before doing so, I just wanted to make sure that I really am in the wrong and that I'm not just being manipulated into thinking I did something bad. Am I the bad guy for posting on social media and exposing my parents and their financial struggles? Edit. My relationship with my sister hasn't been good for a long time. We used to be close when we were younger, but in the past 4 or 5 years, she has been acting really weird. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's because of the kind of friends she has. From what I know, all of them are really cruel and sarcastic. Even though she didn't bully me or my friends when we were in school, I know she had a reputation for being that kind of person. That's part of the reason I don't get along with her anymore. I just can't stand bullies. To be honest, she has changed a lot, and I can't say it's for the better. We barely talk now. That day when she decided to send our parents to talk to me about asking for money, it felt weird because even though we weren't exactly on great terms, we were at least on speaking terms. And she definitely could have come to me herself. In fact, if she had come to me, I probably would have lent her the money. Anyway, she's been acting really strange in many ways lately, and her behavior has been awful. She has a terrible attitude problem, which is why I don't talk to her much now. Update 1. So the opinions in the comments were mixed. And in the end, I decided to follow my gut. I deleted the post because, even though I got a lot of support from my family members, it didn't mean much. It's not like anyone really reached out to me, it was just surface-level support. Even the people who had contacted my parents to tell them what they were doing was unfair never actually reached out to me. So it was obvious that it was more important for them to call out my parents' behavior than to actually be there for the person who had been going through something. These people just wanted to be part of the drama and feel included. I deleted the post because I had already taken out my frustration on my parents, so the purpose had been fulfilled. 4 days passed since the last time I spoke with them, and I deleted the post this morning. After that, I decided to make amends with my uncle and aunt because I felt like I owed them an explanation more than I did my parents. They had tried to be there for me as much as they could, and despite that, I hadn't even talked to them before making that post. Things had been pretty awkward between us because I knew they didn't agree with my approach. So, I woke up super early today, deleted the post, and then made breakfast for them as a surprise. They were pretty shocked. When I apologized for not talking to them, they said it was okay. They had just been surprised by the post. They also apologized to me for acting weird after the post because they didn't know what to do or say to make things better. I guess it was just a misunderstanding between us, and we decided to talk things through. I told them that I had just felt really upset and humiliated by the way my parents had treated me. Even though I was very grateful to them for being there for me, I felt like I had to take out my anger on my parents somehow. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but I had to get it out of my system. They told me they understood why I did what I did, but that they didn't necessarily agree with the way I went about it by posting everything online for everyone to see. They explained that many people in the family were very jealous of my uncle and my dad because, compared to them, their lives had been great. A lot of my relatives couldn't stand that, so it was natural for them to feel good about my dad going through hard times. That was part of the reason they didn't want any of this to be known. That explained why so many of my relatives had shown me so much support in the comments, but never actually bothered to reach out to me. They were happy about my dad's downfall but didn't care at all about what I was going through. Anyway, I learned that lesson, and I told them that I had deleted the post. They were more than happy to have me at home because I had always been a good kid and reminded them a lot of their own children. When they mentioned that, I decided to tell them that I was also really upset with my sister. A big part of the reason my parents and I had that fight that day was because I was angry that she hadn't come to ask me for the money herself. I wasn't really expecting to get an explanation about that. I was just venting to them since I hadn't mentioned this detail before, and I also hadn't included it in my post. But when I told them that my sister had sent our parents to ask me for money, they started to look really surprised. It was clear they knew something, so I asked them what was bothering them. They told me they didn't understand why my sister felt the need to make our parents ask for money to cover rent because she had already asked them for money for rent, and they thought they had covered everything. That was my turn to be shocked because I had no idea about that. After talking to them a little more about it, I found out that while my sister was in college, she knew that our parents weren't in a position to support her. So whenever she needed something, she would contact my uncle and aunt. She had also been depending on them. The student loan only covered university-related expenses. But of course, people have other expenses too, and my uncle and aunt had covered all of them. They never told me because my sister had wanted it to be a secret, and she promised them she would pay them back as soon as she had enough money to do so. Recently, a few weeks ago, she had asked for a couple of $1,000s because she was moving into a new apartment with her friends and needed to cover her share of the rent. They agreed to help her because she finally had a job and told them she was going to start paying them back now. So now I'm really confused. If my sister had already borrowed money from my uncle to cover rent, why was she asking me for money? It just doesn't make sense. And even my uncle and aunt don't have any answers right now. They could talk to her directly and get to the bottom of it, but they think it would be better for me to discuss it with her personally since we clearly have a lot to talk about and clear up between us. I guess that's exactly what I'll have to do if I want to figure out what's going on because this is really suspicious. Update 2. So, 2 days after my last update, and after a lot of deliberation, I finally decided to talk to my sister. It was the only way to get to the bottom of what was happening. I hadn't blocked her, and she hadn't blocked me either, so I just sent her a message to see if she was willing to talk to me, and she agreed pretty easily. I called her last night, and we ended up talking for quite a while. It turns out that I don't think she was at fault in any of this. Apparently, she had borrowed some money from our uncle to cover part of the rent, but then one of her friends decided to move in with her boyfriend instead of with their group. This meant that everyone would have to contribute more since one person had backed out, putting her in a difficult position because the apartment they had planned to rent was quite expensive. She decided to ask our parents for help just this once, and she told me she had asked them to help her directly, not to ask me. She had no idea why they had done that, and she didn't even know they had gone to me for the money until I told her last night. It seems that our parents told her the reason we had a fight was that I was demanding money from them to add to my college savings, and that they had refused me. My sister believed that and had no idea about the real reason I had fought with our parents. When she found out, she was shocked. We figured that our parents probably didn't want to help her by giving money out of their own pocket, so they came to me and made it seem like she was the one asking for help. After that, we talked about our sibling relationship. I decided to be honest with her and told her that I had distanced myself because she had changed a lot as a person and had become really mean, almost like a bully. I thought she would deny it and we'd end up fighting, but she actually admitted it. She acknowledged that she had been terrible in high school but said she had changed a lot in college. She wanted to work on our relationship, but she felt that I was so closed off that she didn't think it would work even if she tried to talk to me. We decided to put the past behind us and try to fix things for the sake of our future. It was clear that our parents had taken advantage of our tense relationship to turn us against each other. For those wondering, she was able to move into the new apartment with her friends. She had to come up with an excuse to explain why she only had part of the rent, but thanks to my post, they realized what was going on and offered to cover her until she could pay them back. Her friends didn't judge her, so props to them. I'm happy with how things turned out. I was able to get to the bottom of what happened and also fix things with my sister. However, my parents and I still haven't spoken, and given what I just found out, I don't think we'll be in contact anytime soon. In fact, I'd even say my sister will probably stop talking to them too. Update 3. So, I recently started college, and I already love it. It's been a few months since I last spoke to my parents, and they've blocked me. I don't know why they blocked me because, judging by their actions, I should have been the one blocking them. My sister also hasn't spoken to them since she found out the truth about what happened between me and our parents. However, we are actively working on our relationship and trying to be the siblings we used to be. So far, I'd say it's going pretty well, and I'm really happy about that. My uncle and aunt have obviously stayed in touch with me, and it's a happy coincidence that one of my cousins, one of their kids, recently started working on a project that will require him to visit my state quite often. I'll be seeing him soon. I don't really miss my parents right now, and for those asking if I lent money to my sister or if I plan to, the answer is no. She hasn't asked me for money, and I haven't lent her any. Let's just say my sister doesn't have a good financial track record with my uncles, so I'm not taking that risk. Besides, she already has a job now, so at least she doesn't need it, and as far as I know, she's even started paying back some of what she borrowed from my uncles. Maybe I should be the one asking my sister for money now. But jokes aside, that's what's been happening lately. Update 4. I think it's been about 4 months since my last update. I haven't checked my last post before writing this, so sorry if I left any comments unanswered. I'm in exam season and have little time to write, but I need some advice. Well, actually, advice for my sister. She knows about these posts and wants me to make one on her behalf. We still talk from time to time, and just yesterday she told me that our parents have asked her for money. They want to expand their business to make it more profitable than it is now. I think this is a terrible idea because if the business isn't growing on its own, throwing more money into it after years of stagnation doesn't seem like the best move. Even my uncles think the same, which is why they were the first to reject the idea. They've asked her for something like $10,000 to create a better presence on social media. My sister says she's hesitant to do it since they called her, she never blocked them, she just stopped talking to them, and they told her they had always maintained a certain lifestyle for us. Well, basically the same thing they told me. I told my sister that under no circumstances should she lend our parents money. They still haven't paid back anything they owe our uncles. But my sister is still unsure. Even though I think Reddit will respond similarly to what I told her, she needs to know if she's really in the wrong for refusing. Update 5. Thanks for the comments saying she wasn't in the wrong, though some called her dumb for even asking. I won't deny that they're right, but she was excited to ask here after I told her how this works. In the end, she didn't lend them the money and told them so in a series of messages, but she didn't get to finish writing everything she wanted to say to our parents because they blocked her too, or at least the messages aren't showing as received, and it's been several days. We know from our uncles that they haven't gone on a trip, so it's not like they're out of coverage. It's likely that when she told them she wasn't going to lend them the money, they blocked her. It's funny how they see taking care of us until we were 18 as a favor they did for us when it was their obligation for bringing us into this world. The lifestyle is their own thing because it's not like we benefited from those things. Most of the time, the trips and cars they've bought, the ones that are part of their lifestyle, have been purchases for themselves. So making us feel guilty because they spent money like drunken sailors isn't our fault. And for the person who said investing in social media is a good idea, I agree. The problem is that my parents should first have a business that actually works well, and then enhance it with social media. Throwing money into an online presence isn't going to fix the fundamental problems they have. And testing this idea with our money seems like an even worse idea. Thanks everyone for helping me with this problem.